Hello and welcome to a Team Moray Robotics video. Today it's something different and time for Motorama this year, which is slowly getting closer. This year I'm going to bring my first ever beetle weight, which will be an overhead saw robot called Deadite. My dad's also going to bring his first beetle weight called Drop Shot, which is like a big version of Slicer that uses all the same parts that Deadite does, but with a lifter instead of a saw. I'll also be bringing Moray and Kickserve, and speaking of Moray, the next event recap will be the long-awaited return of Moray from Rabid's summer event. The last Motorama I brought the ants to compete with, but I also brought something a little bit different. Moto has a fun class of robots called These Robots Suck, which is run by Bryce from the Roomba team. It's a competition meant entirely for fun with no stakes whatsoever, and it's basically a bunch of grudge matches in the downtime between main tournament fights. The rules are simple. It's only robots made of scrap parts and random objects you have laying around the garage. I think there's a limit of like $20 or something that you could spend on new stuff to get it running. Last year's theme was toys, but there are always modified Roombas and other deadly appliances. I got to drive a Roomba with a chainsaw on it in 2024, which is what got me to build my own robot for this. The robot I built for These Robots Suck was Count Vacula, a vacuum that sucks dust, blood, and just sucks. My original plan was to have a beetle ready for this event, but I didn't have time, so I bought a cheap Roomba knockoff at Five Below called an automatic floor cleaner and put all the beetle stuff in it. That's how I ended up with a Roomba with a Just Cuz hub motor on it. As far as I know, this is the world's only overhead sawbot Roomba. I also had a backup screwdriver lifter attachment if the saw didn't work. The process of making Count Vacula involved taking everything out of the vacuum and playing with its crazy fan motor. Maybe I can use this for something later on. I 3D printed holders that would get mounted to the vacuum for the servo and the drive motors to sit in, and then I used a Dremel to cut holes where the wheels and the arm would need to go. I also cut off all the unnecessary bits that stuck out from the bottom. Wiring the robot up was pretty easy, even though it was my first time using Beetle stuff, because I used all the stuff that comes in an SSP kit, which is very simple to put together. The first test went well, and it drove shockingly smoothly, but I couldn't figure out how to get the weapon motor to spin on the new Radiomaster Zorro transmitter. For the theming, I was inspired by many of the greatest vampire movies of all time to call it Count Vacula, because it sounds similar to that other vampire guy. I was also able to acquire some sponsors that are definitely not fictional at all. When Count Vacula made it to the event, in all his well-engineered glory, he got to meet Tony Clifton and Mr. Roper, and you can see the excitement on his face here. John, who ran Turbo Smasher, and Keziah Sky from Chainsaw Kitty helped me figure out the Radiomaster Zorro so I could spin the saw up, and thank you to them for doing that. Opening the whole robot up was difficult because all the tiny screws that hold the Roomba shell together are on the bottom, but fortunately the compartment to empty all the dust and the floor bits had an easily removable lid that made changing the battery really easy. While testing it at the event, I found out that it's really fast, but it tips over if you turn too fast and it can't self-right. The arm also ejected itself because the only screw holding it to the servo arm was flathead and pulled out of the TPU. After that promising test, I was ready to wait for the fight. The fight was near the end of the day, and it was between Succulent, Toys R Sus, Walker Lifter Ranger, Pups of War, Shushko Bobber, and the Big Yucky, which is bananas glued to an RC car. The builder of the Big Yucky, Aiden, is also responsible for Big Mouth Billy Basher, and is a fan of my channel, so it was nice to meet him. Hopefully we fight with our more competitive robots this year. When the fight starts, Walker Lifter Ranger chucks Count Vacula over Shushko Bobber. I love how I tried to use the saw but missed so bad. I cut into the floor and then this happens. Count Vacula gets picked up and smashed down onto the floor where the top plate comes off and the arm comes loose. If you look very carefully though, Walker Lifter Ranger slammed Count Vacula's saw down on top of it because some sparks shoot out. While I'm off screen, the Big Yucky dies a tragic death. I try Gary Jin style and swing the arm around, but I get tossed away and then run over. I don't know what happens here, but it's pretty entertaining. Apparently it's hard to drive around with half a face while dragging an arm around by its servo wires, and I can't do much for a while. And what has to be a combat robotics first, a vampire Roomba, gets run over by a dog. Count Vacula gets flipped off screen, and I can't move for the rest of the fight. If you want to watch the whole thing, it's near the end of the Motorama 2025 Day 1 main box stream. Well, that was interesting. I'm very proud to say that Count Vacula outlasted Toys R Us and the Big Yucky. This is a big deal. I think I did actually do a little bit of damage to Walker Lifter Ranger. I think the scratch in the middle of the lower support bar was done by Count Vacula's saw when it got slammed down on top of it. Half the face was removed, and yes, that's the battery sitting there fully exposed. He was at serious risk of being staked through the heart for most of that fight. Multiple wires were ripped out of their solder joints, and there were cracks in various places. Here you can see that the saw cut into its own arm. And while I was trying to move, while I was stuck, the hubs and drive motors just ground down the center of the wheels, which makes these wheels pretty useless now, and it filled the entire center of the robot with foam dust, which is very fun to clean up. He's still not in the best shape, and this was fun, but he definitely won't return this year. Maybe in the future, Count Vacula will make another appearance. But for now, he's going back to his coffin, and I'm going to rank some vampire movies. Vampires, 4 out of 10. There's some great effects and ideas and moments, but this one's pretty terrible. I don't know how John Carpenter managed to make this. There's some really awful editing choices. However, a lot of this movie is so bad it's good entertainment. And it kind of looks like a lipo fire when the vampires catch on fire. Fright Night, 6 out of 10. It's very entertaining, but I think it gets a little too ridiculous by the end, where it prioritizes crazy effects over things that actually make sense, and starts to lose some of the quality it had for most of it, but some of the practical effects are incredible. Nosferatu 2025, 7 out of 10. It looks amazing and the acting is great. There isn't that much of a story, but I still liked it. Best Christmas movie of all time. Sinners, 8 out of 10. It just broke the record for most Oscar nominations, and that's very well deserved. The unbroken shot music scene is one of the best scenes I've seen in any movie, and it's a new and interesting take on vampires. I do think it's a little bit longer than I would have liked, though. Abigail, 8 out of 10. The best dancing ballerina vampire movie. It's super fun. The ending could have used some work, but the cast of characters was great and kept the whole movie entertaining even before the vampire stuff happens. There were a lot of great stunts and practical effects that were very impressive. The Lost Boys, 10 out of 10. A great intro horror movie that perfectly balances comedy and horror, which makes it one of the most fun movies I've ever watched. And it has to have one of the best final moments in any movie. That closing line is just fantastic. I was contractually obligated by Canuck Real Estate to rank those. That's it. Maybe I'll bring Count Vacula back next year, so let me know if you want to see that. Thank you for watching.
Okay.